substance? Are you struggling with book addiction? Are you struggling with sex addiction? Are you struggling with any form of addiction at all? Then this live stream is for you. I want us to have a heart-to-heart moment of discussion. A lot of persons out there are passing through one form of behavioral issues, one form of addictive behavior, one form of habit that is actually draining down their effort, that is actually eating up all they're actually trying to gather up. They are trying to build up, but yet things are actually they are actually habits that are bringing them down. So this particular live stream is to address some of those concerns that relative have, that the clients themselves they have, of which has been a major threat to their growth. We are going to be addressing those areas, and then some of those helpless thoughts of the family and the relative as well as the client on addiction. We are going to be addressing it, and then it is actually a continuation of a series called the doctors were not wrong. Okay, so it's interesting for us to know that most persons are actually in one form of behavioral habitual patterns that they are not comfortable with. Most addicts out there are not okay with their addiction. They want to move on with life. They want a change. They want to grow. They want to go past that stage where they are being controlled by one thing or the other. But yet, the more they make the effort, the more they get stuck. And so they are concerned, how do we get help? They have reached out to different persons. Some have been year in, year out around rehabs, and then they want a major solution. But with all this effort, there seems to be no change. Most families have actually put in the finance, they have put in the time, they have put in the effort. Yet, it seems as though there is no help. It seems as though the hope is bleak. Most persons who have on their own intentionally tried to stop one habitual or addictive pattern, it seems they are helpless and they are crying for help. A couple of them who are doing that particular habit, they are not okay with it. But yet, what is happening? For me as a person, or for most of us who are actually clinicians, we have found ourselves in that position where a client keep coming for rehab over and over again. And at the point they get to, they feel there is nothing new to learn. Some of them live in that deep hopelessness where they feel that for the substance, as long as it's concerned, no one have recovered from it, or if it's going to take me, let it take me, let it end there. So if you're in that position, it is important for you to note that you are not alone, and that's why we should be discussing. And if you come across this particular live stream, please do well to drop your opinion, drop how you feel, drop your challenges, and let's discuss around it. So what are some of those major areas that the clients are concerned? And then when they come for rehab, the question is versus, are the clinicians, are the doctors just looking for my money, or is there an hope for full recovery? So let's start with substance use. What is substance use? Substance use simply means an habitual, repetitive, and harmful use of a substance that alters the psychological and physiological responses of the body. So whenever there is a repetitive, habitual, and harmful use of any substance, despite all this, which it is actually causing a psychological or physiological challenge to that individual, we are saying that substance use disorder has come to play. What is an addiction? An addiction is actually a repetitive, habitual pattern of indulging in one form of practice or the other, of which is not in consonance with the expected ethics of that society. For instance, there are places of which group sex is allowed. There are places of which you can go. If you want to take off your entire clothes, you can do so. You are free to walk around. Yet there are places that if you do the same thing, it looks as though you are not mentally stable. And that's why mental health has been defined by the society and not a constant definition. There's no constant definition for mental health. It's rather what the society say is normal that is actually regarded as being mentally normal. So having understood this about an addiction, that it is a repetitive, a consistent and persistent indulgence in certain actions, in certain patterns that are not in consonant, that are not in keeping with the society expectations, the moral standards of the society, then what are the various forms of addictions? We have book addictions, we have sex addictions, we have food addictions, we have substance use addiction, substance use disorder, and then we also have other forms of disorder such as reading or book addiction. We have screen addictions. In all of them, there is one thing that has been consistent in all, which is the fact that they are all habitual. So they are actually habitual in nature. That is why it is called an addiction. The next one is that it alters the normal psychological pattern or pathway of functioning. At the same time, it also would alter the normal physiological responses or pattern of doing things in most instances. So those are the major characteristics of an addiction. One, the fact that it is habitual in nature. Two, the fact that it alters the psychological functioning, the psychological wiring of that individual. The third is that in most instances, it also alters the normal pathway for physiological functioning of that individual. And then the last is that it causes either moderate to severe distress to the individual and the family of that person. So that is when we see there is an addiction. Okay? So no matter the form of the addiction, whether gambling, it is playing a significant psychological or emotional role on the mental stability of the family, the relative, and the client. So when it comes to an addiction, it is not just about the client. It is an all-encompassing discussion, because we also have clinicians who are frustrated with the fact that despite the number of times the client keeps coming, there seems to be the more he comes, the faster he or she relapses. And the clinicians are concerned. It looks as though they are not doing their best or they don't even know what they are doing. And that will take us to what is the solution? How can substance use be managed, or how can addiction be managed? An addiction can actually be managed in three major forms, or I would say two major forms. One, as an inpatient care or as an outpatient care. For an outpatient care, it can be managed as a virtual section, just as we are discussing. It can be a one-on-one or a group, but it is done virtually. Or it can be done as a physical section where the individual comes from his or her home to meet the caregiver. So that is the outpatient plan. Now for the inpatient plan, it is where there is a residential, full residential provision for the individual to come in. So the individual needs to fully come in. That is when we say that it is an inpatient management. Now, what determines if it is going to be inpatient or it's going to be outpatient for any form of addiction? The chronicity, which has to do with when did the client start the behavior? When did the client start that form of addiction? Two, the financial ability, the financial strength of the client or the family. A moment, please. I need to check up on something. A moment, please. So, those are the areas that one needs to check. First, is the client financially buoyant enough to sponsor his or her admission? Next is when did the client start the use? And then the third one is the level of dysfunctioning. The level of dysfunctioning. So can the client be able to function optimally at home, or he would need uh, a closed door management and observation? That's another thing that will determine if the client should be managed as an outpatient or as an inpatient. What is the next factor to consider? The distance. Distance play a role in determining if the client should be managed as an inpatient or as an outpatient. Because some of the relatives will be like, the distance is too far, and so I can't be visiting every day. Either the client should be left there or will come once in a while. The next one would be the aspect of the level of understanding, the perception of the client and relative. So some of the clients, you will see persons, especially in the African setting, they believe everybody that just passes through the gate or the door of a rehab center, it means the person is psychologically unstable. No, there are different things that may make one to visit a rehab center. Some persons are visiting as workers. Some persons are visiting as just to check up on someone. So not everybody that visits a rehab center are actually mentally unstable. So the perception in most instances will determine if a relative will be ready to volunteer for their client to go through full-time inpatient rehabilitation. Haven't understood this. What are then the chances, the duration? This is where most relatives are concerned. They start asking the question, how long is he going to stay and so on. Remember I talked about chronicity and so on. For an habit, it is essential that we note that an habit takes 21 days to form. An habit, every habit that we exhibit, it takes the space, the time frame of 21 days to form. But to sustain that habit, it will need the time frame of minimum of 6 months for the habit to be sustained. So if you have done a particular thing for 21 days, it will now become an habit. But when you extend it to 6 months, it is now becoming a part of you that you almost cannot escape from. So an habit takes 21 days to form, but takes the space of 6 months for it to become a part and parcel of that individual. This is the reason why most, especially that of substance, most rehabilitation for an addict takes as much as 6 months as standard. All right? Having understood this, the rehab for somebody that is using substance and someone that is a gambler, their pattern of management are different. For the gambler, it is to manage that obsession so that the individual, when he or she is confronted with that thought, that ruminating thought of gambling, there's actually a route of escape, not to conform. Whereas for the substance user, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just the psychological pressure coming from the need to use the substance. It also entails the availability of the substance, the supplier. So it's a chain. You look at who supplies, where do they supply, how did he or she get into it. So a lot of things will be looked into. So that also includes if it was a sex addiction. So factors will be checked to know what form of management will be more effective and what form of management will be more reliable. Having understood this, what are the challenges and other questions that relatives will ask? Is it possible for my client to ever stop substance and never go back to it? What you need to know is that the fact that most persons finds it difficult to completely quit substance use does not mean people that have quit are not there. Or the fact that someone have quit the use of substance use for the space of 10 years means the person will never relapse. If you still put yourself under the same atmosphere and circumstance that made you go into substance use, you will still relapse. You will definitely relapse. So that's why you need to understand that in rehabilitation for an addict, it takes both the effort of the family, the effort of the client, then the effort of the caregivers. So it's actually in a pyramidal way. The, the client is the one at the top, the relative this end, the caregiver this other end. So the decision for the care or for the rehabilitation of an addict is a three-way process, which is the client, the family, and then the caregiver. So decisions should be around these persons. Now, sometimes when the relative come, the doctor will tell you, I don't think your client is stable enough. And then the client will be like, how? I am okay now. I can do very well. And the doctor will say, no, I have been working for the past 20 years. And clients with this particular presentation, if they are discharged at this very point, they tend to relapse very fast. Some relatives may feel at that point they just want to extort from them. No, the doctors are not wrong. They were not wrong when they were telling you that, because substance or an addiction is habitual in nature. Okay? And so therefore, when they are telling you there is need for you to stay a bit further, it's because they are looking at your responses to other external factors. There are a lot that would lead one into substance use, which is the craving, and then we have the triggers. And I've said over and over that the triggers are those things, both internal and external, that can make one, it acts as a cue that makes one go to substance use. While craving is just an internal desire. It's an internal desire wanting to go back to that habit of that addictive habit or addictive behavior. So you may need at most time to check if the client has been able to identify their triggers, if they have been able to identify the solutions on how to handle those triggers, and then if they are actually ready for that particular process. So the next one that most clients, they start asking questions and so on, is the fact that most times when they come, they feel everything needs to be done in haste. No, the substance will not just start one day. So you may need to give it enough time for the client to actually step in fully into or acclimatize well into the whole therapy sections. So having understood this, we want to look at some emotional dimensions that most relatives are actually passing through or they are facing with the management of substance users. So most of the families that have an addict, they actually feel isolated. Okay? They isolate both the ones using the substance. You see that the public tend to isolate the ones using the substance and the family. So because of this stigmatization, this isolation, most of them pass through an emotional distress. So the second one is when love becomes enabling, the trap of complacency. What do we mean here? Many relatives confuse support with sacrifice. A spouse who maybe because he doesn't want to act or sound judgmental may end up enabling the client who is taking alcohol to continue the alcohol intake. And one thing you need to know about clients who are into one form of addiction or the other is that most of them are actually manipulative in nature. They will want to manipulate you to get what they want. And when you are not cautious enough, they can actually go back to that particular habit. So the next one is that there's a guilt and helplessness, the emotional spiral of loved one. Now, what are we saying here? Some family members often feel guilty for wanting to step back. So some of them will be like, if I become firm and allow this patient just to, or this person to face the pain of this addiction a bit. So some people will start judging them. They'll feel some people want to be like, he doesn't love enough. He doesn't care about them. So because of them, they are actually caught up with that trap where they are just pretending or they just need to overstress themselves. So that will take us to the next one, which is for most people, the support they used to get, the circle has been broken. So you find most person after the second or third admission, they don't get that amount of support they usually get to sponsor their bill, to sponsor their rehab and their therapy sections. That's another challenge. The next one we need to understand is that the need for parallel healing path, which is that if you are managing just the client is not enough. You need to manage the client and the family, because the family can serve as a trigger to the client and will return the client back to the initial state. And most times, if it has to do with empowerment, you may need the contribution. You may need the contribution of the family, right? Excuse a moment. So that's why you need to carry the family along at every phase of the therapy, every phase of the treatment. They need to be carried along. You need to explain things, keep explaining things to them. All right? Having understood this, most families, they are already emotionally broken. And that's why I see some family during sections, they cry. Some of them said regretful words. It's because they have kept trying and over. So in most of these instances, right, you may need to do lots of reassurance to the family. You may need to do lots of reassurance to them that there is actually hope. And then you follow up with their outpatient for those that are actually on outpatient. So whenever the clinician is telling you that, I think we may need to get more time, it is not because the clinician wants to take your money, but because he or she knows that an addiction is an habit. And so you may need some time for this habit to actually be suppressed. So at this point, if you have any question, any suggestion, any contribution, please do well to drop it in the comment box. If not, we'll be wrapping up at this point. We may have to call it a day. Any question, any suggestion, any contribution, any opinion? All right, I think at this point we may need to draw the curtain here. Thank you so much for your time. Please, if you're just connecting, do well to like the live stream. Do well to also click the subscribe button to ensure that you actually subscribe to this channel, and help me to share this particular live stream so that people that may need this live stream, they will stand the chance and benefit to also explore this opportunity. Thank you so much. I look forward to that moment where this particular channel becomes your most favorite click. But for now, stay safe. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.